Alright, let's make some sprites. So I'm going to show you in this video how to use the built-in sprite editor in GameMaker to create a cute little blob with a little bit of personality and some shadows and stuff. And we're going to make that cute little blob have a walk animation and a jump animation. So first things first, I have here a new empty game. You don't have to have an empty game. You may have written a game. We're just going to work with building sprites today. So I'm going to right click on the sprites. I'm going to hit create. I'm going to go down here to sprite. That's going to create me an empty sprite. I'm going to name this thing SPR underscore player static. So that's my, just the, bare bones image of my sprite. I may or may not use this in the game. A lot of games include an idle animation where your character does some little shruggy movement or kind of dances to themselves or whatever. I'm just gonna have a static image to start with. I've got this thing set at 64 by 64. If we wanted to change that, we can hit the resize sprite. We could put in anything we wanted. I'm gonna leave it as 64 by 64. Don't worry too much if they're a little oversized. By the end of this video, you'll realize that things are a little oversized on my sprite, and I'll probably have to make the collision mask a little different, but that'll be okay. We can deal with that. In here, I'm going to set this to bottom center, and that's because my sprite is going to be attached to the bottom at all times. So that's because I'm building this sprite for a platformer. If you were building this ship to move around in space or something, you'd probably want to handle it by the center. I want to handle this by the bottom, so I'm going to handle it by bottom center. So then my next task is going to be to hit edit image. So we're going to go into the image editor. I'm going to grab this kind of default orange color here, and I'm going to make a base for my sprite so he doesn't get away from me too much. So I'm going to go something like this as a base, and then I'm going to make a little gumdroppy kind of shape here. So a little bit of a roundy guy. I'm not super duper happy with how that went, so I'm going to try that again. Okay, and I'm pretty pleased with this as a shape. I'm just going to do a couple little pixel refinements here to make him just a touch more even. So I'm just looking at that side and trying to make things a little bit more even here. I think I went 1 pixel too far there. And maybe one more there. And one more there. Okay, so I think that's basically got my little guy here. And yeah, I think I'm more or less happy with this dude. All right, so next thing, I'm going to color him yellow. So I'm going to grab a yellow color, and I'm going to grab the fill bucket, and I'm going to pop that in. Oh, God, that's bright. Okay, so we're going to dull out the fill there a little bit. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on this guy, and I'm going to say, all right, I want that to be a little more orange. And then we're going to try that. Oh, so that's not yellow enough. So here I'm adjusting the hue, and between 47 and 57, it gets from being too yellow to being not yellow enough. So I'm just going to split the difference, and I'm going to say, let's go to 52. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that color. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to call this layer here. We're going to call this the body. Okay, and now I'm done with that body layer. So that's the body of my little guy. I'm going to add a new layer, which you can do here, or you can right click and hit add layer. I'm actually going to need 2, so I'm going to put in 2. I'm going to call this one highlights, and I'm going to call this one here eyes. So we've got 3 layers now. I've got body, highlights, and eyes, and those are going to be the layers that I'm going to deal with throughout this throughout these little animation. So let's select the eyes layer, and let's draw some eyes in there. I'm going to use kind of small eyes, and I'm going to give him an eye here and an eye there. You want this to be looking at about 45 degrees on. I'm realizing that I probably should scoot that first eye over just a bit. So I'm going to scoot him over just a little bit. Okay, so now I've got eyes. Let's see. I'm going to do a little bit of highlight and low lighting. So I'm going to grab my highlights layer. I'm going to color pick this. So this is now that body color, right? And I'm just going to grab a slightly lighter shade of that. So actually, maybe I will just go with the... let's actually just go with that default yellow here. That was a little bit too bright for the whole body. Am I actually drawing on this? Why am I not drawing on this layer? Oh, because I have the color picker tool selected. Let's select the paint. Let's select the pencil tool. And then I'm going to make this a 1 pixel brush. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of a highlight blob on my dude's head. Not real happy with that top pixel. I think that looks okay-ish. Actually, let's do 2 pixels on top. And maybe a couple pixels down there. Okay. So that's a kind of a highlight on his head. So that's like the light shining off of his head. As you can see, I feel that. Now we're going to need a shadow back down here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my body color again. And then I'm going to make this just a little bit darker. So I'm just going to kind of scroll down this way. And we're going to go a little bit darker than that even. So we're just going to pop that down. That's too dark. So let's go back in here and do this one. That's also too dark. That's not dark enough. Okay. So between 90 and 100 feels like, let's try 95. Okay, I think that'll work for a shadow color. Actually, I want to make that just a little bit orangier. Let me go just a little bit more orangey. Nope, not incredibly happy with that. That work. Okay, so now I'm just gonna kind of freehand a shadow on here. So there's a little bit of a shadow there. That shadow is a little bit too dark. Let's go ahead and tweak that just a little bit. So that shadow got a little too dark. So we're just going to go a little bit lighter. And I'm just going to use a paint bucket on it. Lighten it up. That's still a little too dark. A little bit brighter. Let's see. There we go. Much better. Okay. So I've got my color selected. Like, man, this could take hours. I'm sure you can see that, like, if you were real perfection-y, this might take a really long time. Believe me, I'm really guilty of trying to make things real perfect. I'm not a heck of a sprite animator, honestly. So sometimes I will spend a really long time tweaking with the color. You'll watch other creators who are like, yeah, this is just exactly the right color, and they'll find the thing right away. I'm not that guy. I want to give my little character a little bit of personality too. So I'm going to grab kind of a little bit of a blushy color. So I'm going to go just a little bit redder than orange here. And I'm going to do just a real small. That looks a little too much. So that's a little too different. So we're going to go, I think that'll work. That's not quite pink enough. So I want that to be just a little bit more pinky. A little bit more pinky. And then that's too saturated, or too hued. So let's go just right there. That should work. Okay, so I'm just gonna use just a little pencil brush to give him just a little bit of under eye shadow here. You might notice that those aren't symmetrical. I don't really like this one on the right, so I'm just going to delete that one. And we can go ahead and select this guy. Oh, shoot. I'm on the highlights layer. This happens to me all the time that I'll draw in the wrong layer. So I'm going to go back to the eyes layer. And I'm going to try a slightly different saturation method. So I'm going to grab this color. I'll just try a slightly different color here. And I just want to give him a little bit of texture under each eye. Those happen to be exactly symmetrical. Do I think that looks okay? I think I don't like that pixel right there. And I think I don't like the one on the end either. All right. So we've got a little bit of blush on him. I think he's looking kind of cute. I like my sprites to be cute. So I'm pretty happy with this guy. So that's us kind of done with the static one. Now what we're going to do is we're going to right click on this and we're going to hit duplicate and we're going to start making an animation. So I need to change the name of this thing. So I'm going to hit rename here since I accidentally clicked out of it. And we're going to make a walk animation now. So our walk animation is going to look an awful lot like our static animation, but it's going to animate. So here, I've got my walk guy open. Hit edit image. This is a bit like the layers. Just make sure that you're editing the right thing. So I'm going to close the static one. So I'm only dealing with the walking one. I want to make sure that all my layers are doing what I think they're doing. So with the body off, I'm seeing the highlights and the eyes. With the highlights, okay, that's just the highlights, and eyes are only doing eyes. Cool. So that's just my sanity check, right? Before I start animating, I want to make sure that everything's in the right layers. Now up here at the top, we've got our frames. So I'm going to hit duplicate frame, and I'm going to do 5 frames for my walk animation. And my walk animation, I'm going to do 5 frames, but I'm only going to make 3 right now. Reason for that will become kind of obvious in a second. So I've got my basically round player right now. And when he walks, I want him to just kind of squish out and then come back to round. Now, there's 2 things here. There's a lesson of making animations that's a little bit hard to learn that's taken me a long time personally. There are 2 things in the game. There's moving the character around. That's going to be done by the code. And then there's making the picture of the character moving. That's the animation. So for the animation, we're going to leave the character in the middle of the screen here. We're not going to scoot them off to the right or the left based on which way they're walking. We're just doing it. We're just manipulating the image. We're not moving the character. So here, what I'm going to do, I have a tendency to do this where I turn off the eyes and the highlights. I'm going to copy this body layer. So I'm going to hit duplicate layer. That's going to make a body 2 layer. I'm going to scoot that down. I'm going to have to remember to clean that up later. But what that's going to give me is that's going to give me what the body used to look like so I can turn it on and off. Now, I'm going to go into this body layer and I'm going to sketch out some sizes. So I'm going to actually edit this 3rd frame. That's going to be as squished as he gets. So as squished as he gets is going to be, we're going to take our pencil tool. We're going to grab our color for this orange. That's my line color. And I'm going to say, all right, as squished as he gets, I want him to go from this side of the screen to this side of the screen. And he's going to probably get a lot longer. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the body with an eraser right now before I get too far into this. And you'll notice that this isn't doing anything. The reason it's not doing anything is that I have the body 2 layer on, and so you can see it. So if I turn that off, I can see what I'm actually working with here. And I can see that I went a little bit overboard on that base, on that right-hand side. So I'm going to maybe put in a couple of more pixels there, but not too many. And then I'm going to go ahead and do my best to kind of outline what my little guy is going to look like. So we're going to get something like that. You'll notice these aren't quite symmetrical. That actually makes your game a little bit, I don't know, I like it. I think it makes your game cuter when your characters aren't quite symmetrical. He was about this high. He's probably not going to be that high when he's all squished out like this. So we're going to go, oops, I don't like that. We're going to go from about here. And I feel like that didn't get quite round enough. And we're going to go out. Okay, now I'm not real happy with the way this end is looking. So I'm just going to go in and kind of pixelify and like one kind of pixel at a time manipulate the way this end is looking. Let's see, do I like that? If I turn the other body off, I think that'll look okay. It's not quite symmetrical, but that's all right. It did get substantially bigger. I'm a little worried that he got so much bigger, because I think that'll make the game feel like he's gaining weight and losing weight as he bounces. So I think I probably should have made him a little shorter. So I'm going to go ahead and trim him a little bit. So I'm just going to say, all right, let's go out to here, and then we'll come back across a fair bit lower. And then we'll run an eraser here on that upper line. Okay, and I feel like I'm not the biggest fan of that section there. And I also would like him to be higher on this side and then lower on that side. So let's run a little bit of an eraser through here. And let's see what we're looking at. Whoops, I think I erased the wrong one. Okay, you can also use the ellipse tool here. So if you want to build this with an ellipse, you can go ahead and you can say, okay, I want an ellipse that goes from like here to there. So maybe let's do that. So let's just say, all right, let me just dump all of this. Oops, that's not the right tool. So let's say I just want to dump all of my body here, and I want to make an ellipse. So I want to make an ellipse with the small brush, and I think we decided that maybe we want our ellipse to look like that. Great. That's a perfectly valid way to do this. We can go ahead and do that as our body. I think that looks a little bit too symmetrical for my taste. So, oh, and we didn't quite hit the bottom. So we're going to run that ellipse again. And just make sure it actually hits the bottom of the screen. All right. I think we'll go with it. I'm not the most happy with it. I wish I had been able to freehand it well, but, you know, shit happens. Okay, so now we're going to grab our fill tool. Oh, we need to turn our body 2 on. Grab our fill color. Turn that off. Oh, and I'm not selected on the right layer, so select the body layer. Do that painting. Okay, and then I'm going to grab some eyes. So we're going to turn the eyes back on. Those are obviously in the wrong spot. So we're going to grab the eyes. We're going to scoot them down over here. And then I'm going to scoot them apart. Then we're going to go ahead and turn on our highlights. I'm going to grab this highlight here. I'm going to notice that highlight's probably not the right shape. So we're going to go ahead and select our color that highlight is made out of. And we're going to change the shape of this highlight a little bit. So I'm basically going to make the highlight longer and a bit narrower. So that's our kind of new highlight. And then we're going to do a similar thing for the shadow. So notice that you can't change anything outside the selection. So if you want to drop the selection, you can hit escape. So I want to grab this shadow highlight. I'm just going to grab that texture. I'm going to grab that shadow itself. I'm going to scoot the shadow over a little bit. Let's see, I already got the color selected. So now I'm going to draw a bit of a new shadow. So my new shadow, oops, I can't draw outside this selection. So my new shadow is going to kind of be out in here. And now I want to erase that other stuff. Be careful if you just draw over top of it with the body color, it'll look like it's erased. But you really want to be paying attention to what's going to happen when we remove the body there. So that's the little bit I need to mind. So I'm just going to go ahead and erase a bunch of that. Okay. So now we've got him kind of squishing down. So now we can see this transition is a bit much. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this middle frame and we're going to do basically the same process, but we're going to draw it so we're going to draw it halfway between. So all the changes we made, we're going to basically try to do halfway on each of them. I've got my body 2 layer on here that I'm still using for a reference. So I'm going to turn off highlights. I'm going to turn off eyes. I've got my body layer that I'm manipulating for this frame. So we can see this is what the changes were, right? So then I'm going to say, all right, so between these changes, I'm going to want to make the new height about 40 pixels high. You can see down in here in this bottom right corner, there's the coordinates for your cursor. So we're going to make this 40 pixels high, and we're going to go out to about 8 and over to about 56 or so. So 8, 40, and 56. So I'm just going to draw those in. So I'm going to use this side color. We're going to go to 8. We're going to go to 56. And we're going to go to 40. So those are kind of the points I need to hit. We could use the ellipse tool if we wanted to. I'm going to try to freehand it again just to see if I can make him look good that way. So I'm going to kind of freehand down to here, freehand up to here. Oops, that didn't look good. Freehand up to there and down, and I don't like the way that part went, so we're gonna do it again. Okay, so then we're gonna take our eraser here. I'm gonna hit those couple of pixels there. Okay, and I think I'm relatively happy with that, so I'm gonna turn off that body 2 layer. Okay, so you can see there's not much going on with the body 2 layer, so I need to kind of tweak the body layer, right? Because I didn't actually erase it before I started drawing. Happens. So I'm going to go ahead and get that off. And then in here, I need to erase my original orange body outline here. Okay, and then a little bit of pixel help. So I think I just want one more pixel right there. And I don't like the way those looked. So I'm going to do something like that. Okay. All right, and then we're going to fill in with our body color. So that's our body color. Paint can, fill, fill, fill. Great. All right. So I can see, like, you can hit play here. Oh god, bit fast. Let's make this like say 5 frames a second or something. Okay, we're getting kind of squished down. All right, so now let's look at our eyes. So our eyes to start with are in the exact same spot as they are in the first image, and then in this third image they're way down and right. So we're just going to kind of figure out where they ended up. So this ends up at 3849, and it starts at 3144. So it needs to go like 2 pixels down and 3 or 4 pixels to the right. So I'm going to just grab it, and we're going to go 1, oops, wrong layer. Let's grab the eyes. So 1, 2 pixels over, 1, 2 pixels down, go 3 pixels to the right. Okay, and then this guy needs to move a kind of similar amount. I think that looks all right. Let's run it and see. Okay, those are looking basically all right. So I'm pretty happy with eyes. Now the hard bit, highlights. So highlights are tough because we need to kind of get halfway between the highlight we started with and the highlight we ended with. So I can see, let's see, so if I use the selection tool, I can flip between frames and kind of see what happened. So that highlight moved down several pixels, right? So we need to grab that part and, oops, I'm on the eyes layer, highlights layer. Scoot down a couple of pixels. So I'm going to scoot that down into here. And then we're going to grab our highlight color and our pencil. We're going to make it just a little longer, and we're going to make it a little shorter. Okay, and then we need to work on our shadow. So shadow ends up way over there on the left, so we're going to have to scoot this shadow around. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select our shadow. We're going to scoot it over, and then we're going to do some pixel by pixel manipulation here. So we're going to grab our color. We're going to draw that thing in. So I'm just being a little careful here to draw in my highlights color. Okay, and then looking at where it ends up, I need to take quite a bit off of it. So I'm going to go ahead and just slice a whole bunch off the edge. Okay, so if we hit run, we can see that actually looks pretty decent. So now to make it 5 pixels, right? So, or sorry, 5 frames. So to make it look like we're doing squish, squish, go back to round, we just need to take this frame, duplicate it, and then scoot it over. Then we need to take our starting frame, we're going to duplicate that and scoot it over. So we're starting and ending at the static image. We're in each end, we've got this kind of slightly oblong bit, and then in the middle, we've got our really oblong bit. So if we hit run on this, we can see this is what it's going to look like when our player moves. Now, keep in mind, we don't need to move the player here. This is just us animating their movement. Okay, so we need to talk about collision masks real quick. So collision masks can be a major pain in the ass. So my advice is that every time you create a sprite, you're probably going to want to use the same collision mask if you're using that sprite for multiple things. So here I've got my static sprite and my walking sprite, right? And we can see that on the left side here, you can see the collision mask. I've got that open. So the way I got into that was I just clicked this collision mask guy. And now I can see that those collision masks are different. That's going to cause me some problems. So what I want to do is I want to just make sure that they're the same. So the way I'm going to make sure they're the same is I'm going to go into my workspace and I'm going to open the collision mask little area for both of these. And then I'm going to set my static one to automatic rectangle, right? And that's going to tell me about the collision mask. I can turn that on to, there's a bunch of different modes. I'm going to turn it on to manual really quick. Why am I getting zeros for this? Every once in a while you'll have to close and open your image to get it to actually refresh the values. But what I can see is that my static image of my player has a collision mask here. And we can go ahead and set that to automatic and it'll lock in the values. So we're 17, 47, 36, 63. And then if I go into the player, I can see that its collision mask is actually says it's the same but looks different. So I'm going to close that and open it again and check my collision mask. And I'm seeing now that this is actually different, right? So what I want to do is I just want to make sure that's the same. So I'm going to switch this to manual here, and then I'm going to type in the values from up here. So that's 17, 36, and 63 are the same, so it's just that right one. So that needs to be 47. That's going to give me the same collision mask for these. If I'm doing a platformer or something, you really want those collision masks to be the same amongst all of your animations. So after you've created your animations, you want to go through and double check that they're the same. You also want to double check that everything's got the same origin point or the same center point or the same handle. So bottom center for this one, bottom center for this one. If I had more animations, which I will at the end, I'd want to go back through and double check that they're all the same at the end. For jump is we're going to have a little bit of wind up, and then we're going to get real tall and narrow. We're not actually going to lift the sprite off the bottom of the image. So I'm going to keep a couple of frames. I'm going to delete these frames. So this is going to be us doing a little bit of wind up. So we've got our starting position. We've got a little bit of a crouch down. Then we're going to duplicate the starting position and slide that over. So we're going to go back to our starting position. And then we're going to get kind of taller and narrower. So we're going to duplicate this frame. And what we're going to do is we're going to essentially make taller, narrower. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the eyes and highlights again. And only looking at the body here. I'm going to duplicate this layer again. Slide that down. So that's just going to give me a reference. I'm going to go ahead and erase the whole body layer here. Oops, that's white. Let's try eraser instead. So we're going to erase that whole body layer. So now we've got the body 2 layer is showing. Body layer doesn't have anything in it. And I'm going to go ahead and mark out. And this time I'm going to go ahead and use my ellipse tool with fill. So the way to use an ellipse tool with fill is I'm going to color select this guy. I'm going to swap that over. And then I'm going to color pick this guy. So now we've got our orange outline and filled in body. I'm going to select a filled in ellipse here. I'm going to turn that back down to 1 pixel as my brush. And then I'm going to say, all right, I want to make this a bit taller and a bit narrower. So don't go more than 5 or 10 pixels at a time. It gets to be a lot. So I'm going to start with a corner here and go to there. And then I'm going to realize that my fill didn't work the way I intended it to. So I'm going to Control Z that. I'm going to go ahead and use my regular ellipse tool. And we're going to do that same task. So there's a slightly taller ellipse that looks like it has about the same area. Then we're going to go ahead and swap these out. I'm going to fill that. I'm going to... Oh, I was on the body 2 layer. Dang it. Manipulating the wrong layer. All right, so body layer. Ellipse tool. With the orange color. We're not going to go more than 5 or so pixels taller, so we're going to get something like this. Then I'm going to swap to body. We're going to fill that. We're going to turn off our second body layer. And turn eyes back on. Our eyes are going to need to go... Oops, we're still on the body layer. Up, up, up. Left, left. And then I'm going to scoot them together a pixel, or we're going to scoot them together a pixel. And then we're going to turn our highlights on. I'm just going to grab this highlight here and just literally scoot it up. I'm just going to leave that head highlight basically the same shape. I'm going to grab our shadow highlight, scoot that over a little bit. Then I'm going to grab my color for the highlight and my pencil. And I'm on the highlights layer. I'm going to make this highlight just a little bit taller. And then I'm going to use the eraser to make it a little bit narrower. Okay, So now we've got a little bit of a squish. All right, now we're going to duplicate that frame. I'm going to delete that body 2 layer and duplicate this one. Now I'm going to erase this body layer again. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a big ol' eraser for that. Loop. Oh, and I had that selection on, so I need to drop this selection first and then erase it. You can see in the preview what happened there. So now if we turn off this layer, we only have the eyes and highlights. So we'll turn the eyes and highlights off. Now, this was my previous body, so we want to get this guy a lot taller and narrower. So we're going to go ahead and use our ellipse tool again for that with our 1 wide here and our line color on. So I'm going to go about like that. And we're going to make our guy just barely kissing the ground. Okay, and this is just a little bit too narrow. So I'm going to make it 1 pixel wider. And then, actually, we should probably make it 2 pixels wider. Okay, so we're going to try that again. I'm trying to make sure that this has the same area, roughly, as the previous one, so it doesn't look like he's gaining or losing weight. Okay, I think that worked, so I'm going to call that good. And turn off the previous body layer. Paint. Flip to our fill color. That's not the right color. That's the shade color. All right, so that's the body color. Great. We're going to put our eyes back in. Our eyes are in the same spot they were in the previous frame. So we're, again, going to grab our eyes. Oops. We're in the body layer again. We're going to grab our eyes. We're going to scoot them up a couple of pixels. And I'm going to scoot this one a pixel or 2 closer to the other one. So now we can see that we're getting up a little bit more. All right. Now we're going to look at our highlights. I'm going to grab this highlight, scoot it up a single pixel, and I'm just going to make it a tiny bit smaller. So I just made that just the tiniest little bit smaller. Oh, whoops. I was on the wrong frame. Happens all the time. I want to grab this highlight here. I want to move that up a little bit. So I'm looking back and forth here. So we've moved it up a little bit. I want to move it up 1 more, I think. Okay, so we've got it moved up 1 more, and I do want to make it smaller still. So I'm just going to whack just a couple of pixels off of it. And then our shadow down there is going to need a move. So we're going to need to grab our shadow here. I'm going to scoot that basically over here. And grab my picker for that. And get some more shadow drawn. Oops, I messed up there. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the eraser down here. Okay, and then I'm going to drop my selection there by hitting escape and look at that. So let's see what we got. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that in terms of a jump animation. So now we just need to finish the jump. So to finish the jump, you basically just want to reverse the animation. So you can duplicate the frame, scoot it over. Duplicate this frame, scoot it over. Duplicate this frame, scoot it over. And duplicate this last frame and scoot that one over. All right, so now we've got a little jump cycle. Keep in mind, the little character himself, right, is going to be moved up and down by the controls in the game. This is just a picture of how he's moving. And we can see on this one, even on this middle frame, I still have a lot of headroom above me. That's where our collision mask comes in handy. If we used if we use the kind of rectangle and made it so it covered this middle frame, right? So if we look here in our middle frame, oh, whoops, I've got the walk. That's my problem. Let me close this. So let's look at our collision mask. So that's the walk one, which I don't want to be dealing with. So I'm going to do the walk one as precise per frame. Let's look at the jump one. Okay, so I'm going to open. If I've got a collision mask of rectangle here, I can see that looks about like this. And I can see that's quite a bit bigger than I probably want, because I've got all this area out to the sides that's not going to be covered. Right, so when I'm thinking about which frame I'm on, right, there is an awful lot of that rectangle that doesn't have guy in it most of the time. So this is where you might want to really think about moving to that precise per frame, even though it is going to slow your game down a bit. All right, that's our 3 animation, or our, well, really one picture, right? That's our static. So that's just our player chilling. If we wanted to make a little animation there, we might make a 2-frame animation. We could steal some animations from the walk or the jump for that little animation. So, you know, what the hell, let's do it quick. So let's grab our walk animation, and we'll hit duplicate. And I'm going to call this idle. So our idle animation down here, I'm going to open this in edit image, and I'm going to look at it. Right now it's exactly the same as the walk animation. So I'm just going to delete the most squished and the slightly squished, right? So this is just going to be squish and unsquish. That's how we're going to kind of idle. So our little guy is just going to sit there kind of shrugging and unshrugging. Frankly, I think that's a bit much, probably, that just the difference between these two. So if I was doing a really good job with this, I might duplicate this and add a couple intermediate frames. Whatever. It's an idle animation. It's actually not that, like right now, this is blown up quite a bit. If this was actual size, so this is the actual size of our character, that's his idle animation. And we could even slow it down a little bit. So right now it's 5 frames per second. We could set it to 3. So he's just kind of squishing. We could set it a lot faster, and he'd kind of twitch. Right? So up to you how you set this. I'm going to tend to set these kind of slow so that he just looks like he's just kind of chilling. Your choice, obviously. Sprite animation is definitely an art, not a science. Thanks for watching, guys. I will catch you on the next one.